Welcome back to another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. As always, I'm your host, Dean Simon. And before we get into everything, please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment down below, and subscribe. We are still on the road to 2,000 subscribers. So if that's a journey that you feel compelled to join, please consider pressing that big red subscribe button down below. Also, turn on post notifications so you don't miss out on future Milwaukee Bucks updates. All right, so now that the preamble's over, pretty horrible night, considering the epic highs of the game winner in Indiana from Giannis and silencing the Indiana Pacers crowd, to the lows of losing by nearly 30 on Toronto's home court. In back-to-back nights, and the final score 128-100. This game looked to be another kind of like run and gun, like we're just coming out blazing game, because both teams started out red hot from both the field and from 3-point range. It was like a 20-12 game with like 8 minutes left in the first quarter. It just was kind of a who's going to miss first kind of deal. And we saw pretty early on that it was the Bucks who were going to miss first and who were going to create a bunch of other ways to just beat themselves over the course of the night. But that's something we're going to get into a little bit later. But just strictly speaking, on a night where you didn't get a great Torian Prince night, you didn't get a great Bobby Portis night, who, he's someone that we're going to have to start talking about a little bit, because though he's been great from 3-point range, or at least entering last night's game, he was great from 3-point range. His 2-point attempts, I feel like sometimes Bobby Portis gets a little bit rushed, and that he doesn't really give himself a chance to kind of get into a groove or his rhythm, because we know how Bobby Portis operates. He likes to kind of get the ball with his back to the basket at some point in the mid post and kind of take a couple dribbles and, get into like a groove and get his feel for the game going. But I feel like a lot of his looks to start this game against Toronto, it's just catching it in transit, like semi transition, just one step into a three with no dribbles. And I feel like his first three, four, five shots of the night were just all of that kind of variety, just like jump shots that allowed him like no actual rhythm to get into it. He just kind of caught it and let it go. And we know that Bobby Portis, one of the best aspects of his game is how he's an amazing trailer 3-point shooter, especially in kind of crazed situations where like a ridiculous sequence happens, and then there's Bobby Portis catching and launching in stride for a three. But tonight he just didn't have it, and Torian Prince, of course, didn't have it as well. Just missed a couple open looks, that like step back three against Scotty Barnes that got blocked. 0 for 5 on the night for Torian Prince, and 1 for 13, I believe, was the ledger for both Bobby and Torian Prince combined. And when you get those kinds of efforts while Giannis has a human game of about like 22 points, 8 or 9 rebounds, which he was still phenomenal. He was facing 3 or 4 Raptors every single time he got a touch in the paint, and he was still shooting efficiently, finished 9 of 14. So when you have a game like that and you need outlets for Giannis to hit, and it was a relatively quiet Gary Trent Jr. game as well, you're going to need those other options like the Torian Princes and the Bobby Portises to kind of come alive in those instances. And it just wasn't the case against Toronto. And, credit to them. Like I said, they came out firing from 3-point range, and this isn't necessarily a team that has the greatest shooting personnel in the world. Of course, Brandon Ingram, R.J. Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, and Grady Dick off the bench, even Scotty Barnes, they're all like serviceable to like good 3-point shooters. They're all plus 3-point shooters, but no one that you would consider elite or that you really have to get a hand up on, at least from 3-point range specifically. But because they opened up the first quarter shooting so hot from three, then it kind of sent the Bucks scrambling, and then the zone defense didn't really work, because guys like Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett were able to make really great decisions. Just when they were skipping the ball to each other, and then they throw it cross court out of a double team, and they always just seem to make the right decision. And against a team like that, where kind of their smarts and their shooting accuracy from three beat the Bucks, like it's not really a great combination. It's something that you don't want to come across on a night to night basis if you're Milwaukee. But I think the biggest point of contention for me in this game was the transition defense. I feel like it was soft. Guys weren't really into it. And I feel like, again, coming off of a back-to-back, this is kind of a symptom of that you can see pretty often. It's just the guys looked like they had tired legs, and it really stinks, because with a team that has decidedly gotten a little bit younger and a little more spry, a little more athletic, maybe you'd hope that you had guys in the lineup that were able to kind of withstand those kinds of things. But also, again, coming off a back-to-back against that Pacers team, which was very physical and contentious kind of bout. It was a very tough one to get through. Coming into this game against the Raptors, you would have liked a little more energy, and specifically from guys like Cole Anthony. I felt like he and others like Gary Trent Jr. They just their heads just weren't really in it. They weren't really stopping the ball as much as I would have liked them to, and they were kind of letting guys like Emmanuel Quickly and R.J. Barrett and Brandon Ingram just kind of go full head of steam down towards the rim. Especially R.J. Barrett was a killer in transition against Cole Anthony, and he was just able to get straight to the basket, get whatever he wanted. And in terms of the half court, Emmanuel Quickly, whenever he would be receiving a screen to kind of get Cole Anthony off him, he was just able to get right into the lane for his nice floater, which he has one of the best floaters in the NBA. And I feel like that's something that Doc Rivers and the coaching staff had to have looked at on the scouting report, being like, okay, he loves that little push shot in the lane. So we need to do everything in our power relatively to keep him away from that. But it didn't seem to matter, and he was able to get it off a very healthy amount of times. Too healthy of an amount of times for my liking. But yeah, I feel like there was just no. I guess I'll get into the next one. No urgency, especially in transition defense, but also in the half court. That was where guys like Emmanuel quickly started to kind of get into a groove, and where guys like Brandon Ingram were just able to be as crafty as he is with backing down and hitting shots in the mid range, turnaround fadeaways. He's just a very surgical scorer in itself, and he was really able to show it in the half court against a Bucks defense that just, as a collective, like they weren't really there. At least that's what it felt like. And then on the other side, it seemed like the Raptors, they were doing great with pressuring the ball, especially guys like Scotty Barnes, like 30, 33 feet away from the basket. He was very, very active on that end. And it just seemed like the Bucks were a little bit rattled. And though there were some good plays, there were some sparks. I feel like in the half court was where we saw the Bucks make their worst mistakes. It was they were way too turnover prone in this game, and especially a guy that I've applauded over the past couple of episodes, and it's kind of become a thing of like, oh man, why do you love this guy so much in the comments? I'll say it. I'll be the first one to tell you. Kyle Kuzma made a couple of really like bonehead decisions in this one, and there were a couple of turnovers where he got the ball stripped away from him, just kind of made an errant pass. But then also towards the end of that first quarter, when the shot clock was separated by maybe half a second or 1 second, it was like 25 and 24 on the respective clocks. Kyle Kuzma catches the ball in transition and just lets a three go in transition. He was open. The shot was open. Like, it's not like the shot itself was a bad shot, but considering the time and the situation, where the Bucks clearly wanted to hold for one, and after he took the shot and it missed, Doc Rivers kind of threw his hands up on the sidelines like, Kuz, what are you doing? We need to kind of just keep that under control and hold for the last shot. But Kuzma, in his mind, probably just saw a number on the shot clock and assumed, oh man, okay, so now we have to let this one go because they're going to get another possession anyway, so I'll just shoot this one right now. But I think also just considering that Kuz, he's been doing such a great job recently of just putting his head down and getting towards the rim. And from a box score perspective, this did look like a pretty great game from Kuz once again. It kind of baffled me, like those kinds of decisions, because he's been doing such a great job of not doing too many things that are like outside of himself or outside of his capabilities. He's not taking as many of those kind of transition pull up threes or just shooting threes in general. He's putting his head down, getting towards the basket, operating in the low post sometimes, and making nice cuts. And those were things that he was doing later on in the game when he kind of was able to patch up some of those mistakes. But what he was doing in the second half, where he was kind of just cutting baseline, waiting in the dunker spot to receive a nice pass from Cole Anthony, that's what you like to see him do for the entirety of the game. And I feel like for the most part, he did do that, but the first quarter and the first half in itself was just a very ugly showing for Kyle Kuzma from a mental perspective. He showed that, some of those lingering mistakes from the last stretch of last year and in the postseason are still affecting him, even though offensively he's had more of a resurgence, and defensively he's been pretty sound so far this year. But yeah, it was just killer mistakes like that, unforced errors and just unforced mental mistakes that really, really beat the Milwaukee Bucks tonight. Other than the 3-point shooting slowing down after the first 5 minutes, and letting guys like Scotty Barnes, who they probably came into it thinking, you know what, we're gonna let Scotty shoot threes. Like, there were a couple plays where guys were penetrating the paint for the Raptors, and Giannis would kind of slide over to, because he'd rather concede the Scotty Barnes three than the RJ Barrett or Brandon Ingram layup. And then it ended in a wide open Scotty Barnes three in which he splashed. And then Mamu for the Raptors got it going as well towards the end of the first half, and then that was where things started to really get off the rails, and the Raptors were getting out more often in transition and hitting transition threes. But I mean, really, this game just kind of started to unravel after the Bucks just were beating themselves and making those kinds of of decisions and mental errors. So these are things that are going to have to be cleaned up. I felt like also in a game like this where coming off of a very physical game against Indiana, a guy like Jakob Pertl feasted against the Bucks, and especially in the first half with offensive rebounds, and also Mamu as well got in there. Um, Offensive rebounds and just the lack of rebounding in general in like towards the end of the first quarter and into the second quarter. That's what really started to kind of have the game slip away for the Bucks, where it was like between a 9 and 12 point game, and then the 3 point shooting, again, just the lack of urgency, especially on the defensive end in the second half, is what really led to the Raptors pulling away. And, great performances all around from RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram and Emmanuel Quickly. They were all, like I said, just making very quick and succinct decisions and making the right passes. And it just seemed as though their offense was just in a flow. And I don't know if it was something that the Bucks could have stopped in that game, but they were just very connected with each other. And I feel like if you looked at the opposite end of the floor in the half court for the Bucks, it did not look the same unless there was a pass that was going to Giannis towards the basket driving, and then he was like able to make a decision from there. So yeah, beating ourselves, unforced errors, mental mistakes. That's the big thing from this one. And the 3 point shooting just has to continue to stay hot. And something else that I thought too, after the hot start from three, the Bucks only ended up taking. I don't want to like just guess, but I saw on the graphic during the game that they were like 3 of 6 shooting threes, and that was like towards the end of the first quarter. It seemed as though once they started missing threes, they just stopped shooting them altogether, which is just the complete antithesis of this game plan. Is that it's 3 point volume that the Bucks are after. So when you see them not going down, just the decision to not shoot threes, that's the complete opposite. And that's not what Doc Rivers and this coaching staff is going for. It's that regardless, we're just going to cast them up. We're going to live and die by the three. Maybe not live and die, but that's more of what the game plan is going to be. So of course there's guys that shouldn't be looking to just let them fly if they're missing, like again, like the Kyle Kuzmas of the world. But for guys like AJ Green, Gary Trent Jr., Torian Prince, just got to keep letting them fly, and hopefully things turn around and things happen to fall in your favor. But I felt like once they started to kind of lose confidence in the 3 point shot, that it just through the end of the first half, beginning of the second half, just felt like it wasn't as big of a part of their game plan. So yeah, just a couple of things that need to be fixed, but overall, not too bad. This is a win or a win. This is a loss that you're going to want to forget very soon, and against a very energized and youthful Raptors team and very skilled Raptors team. This is one that you're definitely going to want to forget. But anyways, that'll be it for me today. Thank you very much for tuning into yet another episode of Bucks Latest presented by Fan Arch. Once again, I have been Dean Simon, and before you go, leave that like, leave that comment down below, and subscribe. Still trying to get to 2,000, so if you want to join along, please do so. Turn on post notifications, and I will see you guys in the next one. Go Bucks.